The Antonia fortress lay on the northern side of the temple. Reared on lofty rocks, it dominated and overshadowed the temple area. It consisted of several buildings, among which were our regular barracks, enclosing a yard large enough to contain a place for exercising the troops, a gymnasium, and swimming baths. In the center was the citadel proper with its 4 towers. It rose on a pyramid-like base framed about the summit of the rock. From the galleries of the citadel, there was a clear view of the temple area, and we could always see what was going on there. There was discontent enough among the Jews about that fact, and there were rebellions expressing that discontent. Whenever our guards became visible to them in their march around the galleries, the Jews would shake their fists, white cloths would flutter, and the cry would go up, "Away! Away!" It need hardly be said that our guards paid little attention to these demonstrations. If at all, they lingered for a moment in their stride to take the scene in better. There was also direct access from the Antonia to the temple area, 2 flights of steps separated by a partition wall, but this wall could easily be taken apart, and there was no serious obstacle between us and the temple area. And unknown to most, there was a secret passage built by Herod leading straight from the fortress not into the temple area, but right into the temple itself. Arriving, we took over the command of the cohort stationed in the Antonia, changed the guard, and went to refresh ourselves in the baths. Pilate had dinner served in the citadel gallery, whence, leaning comfortably in his chair, he could observe at his leisure his new unruly subjects in their own temple courts. Cooled by parasols, which shielded us from the light of the setting sun, we sat near him and could look down on the temple, the city of Jerusalem, and all its hilly surroundings. It seemed to us as though the sunlight were melting into the hot, sandy walls of Moab's mountains, visible on the other side of the Dead Sea. The clarity of the air brought them close to our eyes. Sunlight was reflected on the other side from the countless golden thresholds, lintels, and gates of the temple. At that moment, one would have said that it was not built of stone and metals, but consisted of a single flow of molten gold. Among the golden flames fluttered blue and purple hangings. 1,000 beams of light in as many colors shone back from the fantastic structure, massive in the simplicity of its construction, yet light and aerial in its effect, by reason of the many walls which consisted of nothing more than fluttering curtains in reddish purple and light blue. As we learned later, the colors of the curtains were supposed to symbolize the 4 elements out of which the world was made: fire, air, earth, and water. The entire building stood on foundations of white marble, and all about it, as though to guard it tenderly, and as though to accentuate its unique sanctity, countless courts were grouped, sundered from each other by fantastically high towers and gateways, rows of columns and niches, and these again were, like the temple itself, separated from each other by walls and pillars. In a sense, more interesting even than this extraordinary temple and its surroundings was the life that filled the courts. There seemed, to the hasty view, to be nothing but confused motion down there, the white-robed priests walking barefoot, with pious and measured tread, on the polished marble and granite, seemed to be moving over the waters of a lake. The entire mass of human beings seemed to be single and undifferentiated, but more careful observation dispelled that notion, and it was seen that the priests were kept apart from the rest of the multitude in strictest discipline. One might have called it military discipline. After the first dazzle had passed, we could observe clearly the court in which the women were massed, the court of the men, the steps on which were ranged the musicians. There was a separation again between the outer court of the sanctuary, where the priests assembled between services, and the inner court of the sanctuary, where the priests were occupied with the sacred service. All this, we perceived, was severely and exactly divided, as though we had before us not a nation of believers gathered in its temple, but a military organization ready for inspection. We discovered later that the priests and the Levites and all the other temple servants were indeed disciplined like the members of a military organization. The doormen, the night watchmen who made the rounds with torches in their hands in order to control the doormen, the nightmen who called the hours, the trumpeters, the first, second, and third divisions of priests, the priests in service and those that were off duty, the overseers, the lamplighters, the women weavers, the overseers for the sacrifices, which had to be passed and stamped, the innumerable ceremonial attendants. In brief, the entire vast and complicated activity of the temple represented a highly disciplined association, subject to the authority of the high priest and his many delegates, who constituted his immediate entourage. We lay stretched on couches in the gallery of the citadel, cooled by parasols and by oriental fans. We drank wine of Cyprus and ate Jericho figs, and gazed down into the temple of Jehovah, whose jealousy was such that no mortal might look on his face. The temple, with its incalculable treasures of gold, with its costly vessels, its priests and Levites and proud scholars, lay, side by side with the entire city, at our feet. We were fascinated by the spectacle. From the height of our observation post, the swarming thousands had the aspect of helpless pygmies. They, together with their God, were delivered into the mighty hand of Rome, our hand, mere booty taken as the lion takes up his prey. We could not understand from what source they derived their pride and self-assurance. One word of command, one cohort of Ascalon legionaries supported by a detachment of German cavalry, and the silly game of divinity and independence would be over. The Holy of Holies would be violated, the treasures seized, the priesthood scattered like chaff before the wind. And they knew it. We read it in the glow of hatred which showed in the eyes of a white-robed priest, of a long-bearded scholar. Yes, they knew they were as firmly in our hands as toys in the hands of children, and we found incomprehensible their pride and their senseless delusions about their God. Marcus Petronius, the old centurion of the Antonia, who had served under the first procurators and had been in the country many years, knew all the manners and customs and beliefs of the Jews and explained them to us. He it was who informed me first concerning the severe discipline which reigned in the temple, the queer guard changes of the priests and Levites, the night watchmen marching in military formation with their torches, and the sentinels exchanging the watchword, "Is all well?" When the sun's first rays appear, the ram's horns are sounded. A detachment of priests proceeds in marching order to the first service. Marcus told us further concerning the vestments of the high priest, which they consider so sacred that they swear by them. The vestments are kept in one of the towers of the citadel, and the lamp burning at the top proclaims that they have not been touched. They lie under the seal of the procurator and of the high priest. Just try to put that lamp out and see what happens. Marcus related more regarding the Holy of Holies, which no mortal may enter save the high priest in his holy vestments, and even he only once a year, and what a tremendous occasion it is for them when the high priest issues from the Holy of Holies, unblasted by its sanctity. Pilate, who listened with keen interest to this description of the exotic customs of the Jews, asked Marcus Petronius whether in his opinion there really was in the Jewish sanctuary a mystic inner chamber which it was dangerous for a mortal to enter, and whether this inner chamber contained an ass's head, as the Roman legionaries affirmed, this same ass's head being the object of all these Jewish devotions and ceremonies. An ass's head? Pompey, who penetrated into the Holy of Holies, saw no ass's head. Indeed, he saw nothing whatsoever, and I do not know what it contains. I myself have only been in the outer halls, to which the sacrifices are brought. I broke in on the morning of a festival, when it was necessary to restore order. What I saw there was an incredible quantity of gold, golden tables, a gigantic golden altar, on which a tremendous fire burned, a golden candelabrum, countless golden jars, tongs, and other vessels and instruments necessary to their ceremonies, and 2 mystic birds covered by their own wings. I saw everywhere the glitter of gold. It seems that the Jews do not begrudge their deity gold. I should only like to know where they got so much of it. Where? All Jews throughout the world pay taxes to the temple as to a Caesar. For that matter, it is exactly what they say. God is our Caesar. And the joy with which they pay the taxes. Not one of them evades payment. Not one of them is late or in arrears, no matter on what wild, distant island he lives. And not only the taxes. You should see the free will gifts they send to the temple. Do you see that tremendous gate, with its turrets overtopping all the other gates, there at the entrance from the court of the women to the inner court? That gate is worth a kingdom. On one side the doors are covered with silver plates, and on the other side with plates of gold, and it is the gift of one man. But there are others like him. You should see from what remote places of the earth they assemble here. Sometimes you would not believe that they are Jews, and then again, sometimes you come across men of obviously civilized bearing, but I personally doubt whether they are Jews. They are non-Jews, attracted by the mystic power which their God radiates, so that they bring him their prayers, their sacrifices, and their gifts. The gold which you see here on the temple doors is nothing. They have secret treasuries in which are accumulated the gold gifts of all the generations, and no matter how often they are bled of their gold, it flows back again from inexhaustible sources. The Jews are not without influence in the Caesar's court, said Pilate. It is hard to tell how far their influence goes and what circles they have penetrated. You never know, either, whom you affront if you happen to fall foul of the Jews. More than once sacrifices have arrived here sent, secretly or openly, by some of the highest personages in Rome. Worse still, they tell me that the Jews have created much sentiment in favor of their incomprehensible God among the ladies of the aristocracy. Yes, I know it. I know, too, the methods they use to create this sentiment. A spasm passed across Pilate's face. Unseen by the others, he twitched my toga and made as if to say something, but he suddenly bit his lip and remained silent. That, said someone, is the way of women. They are always ready to be victimized by unintelligible mysteries.